never really know what's out there. A simple road trip. That's all it was supposed to be. Just a few laughs, a wrong turn, and some memories. But some roads don't lead you home. They didn't know it yet, but this road, this one was different. As they drove deeper into the woods, the air grew heavy. The trees closed in around them. It felt like something was watching. Then they saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the road, barely visible in the shadows. The moment they passed, it was gone. A whisper cut through the silence, barely audible. They never made it home. What was that? Who was out there? Stay with me. You're about to find out. It was supposed to be just another road trip. A few friends, a car, and the open road ahead. Nothing out of the ordinary. They'd all been looking forward to it for weeks, just a break from the usual grind, a little time away from everything. They packed up the car with snacks, music, and a sense of freedom. The sun was shining, the weather perfect. Everyone was in high spirits, joking and laughing as they drove through familiar streets, eager to escape to wherever the road would take them. Just a group of friends, heading out to create new memories. What could go wrong? There was Mark, the nervous one, constantly checking the map and glancing over his shoulder as if something was always lurking behind them. Then there was Sarah, the adventurous one, always suggesting offbeat routes and laughing at the smallest things. And of course, Jason, the one who was always a bit on edge, but in a way that made him feel like he was keeping an eye on the world. For the rest of them, together, they felt like a team, unstoppable, invincible. But things have a way of changing. As they rolled down the highway, enjoying the smooth ride, the chatter shifted. Hey, have you guys heard about that road? Mark asked, his voice suddenly quieter. I read somewhere that people have gone missing out there. Some folks say it's cursed, like it's not a road that was meant to be traveled. They all laughed. Sarah even teased him, saying, What's the matter, Mark? You scared of a little dirt road? But there was something in the way Mark looked at the rearview mirror, nervous, like he was seeing something that wasn't there. His eyes darted, restless. No, I'm serious, Mark insisted, his hand gripping the edge of his seat. A couple of years ago, some people went down that way and never came back, just disappeared. Jason smirked and rolled his eyes. Come on, Mark, that's just old town gossip. People get lost all the time. It's not like we're going to turn down that road. But still, the words hung in the air at an ease that none of them could shake. The open road was no longer as inviting as it seemed. As they continued down the highway, everything felt too still. The trees on the sides of the road began to grow thicker, taller, blocking out the light. The hum of the engine seemed to grow louder as the miles stretched on. It was the kind of silence that made you feel like you were being watched, even if you couldn't see anyone. Then it happened. Out of nowhere, a figure appeared on the side of the road. Just ahead of them, a person standing by the shoulder wearing a long faded coat. It was the kind of coat you'd expect to see in an old movie, frayed, worn down by time. The figure lifted a hand, a slow, deliberate wave, like they were waiting for someone to notice them. Maybe we should stop, Sarah said, her voice suddenly unsure. What if they need help? But Jason quickly shook his head. No way. We're already running late. Let's just keep going. For a moment, they all exchanged uneasy glances, the kind of glance that says, do we stop, or do we keep going? The figure's hand lowered, the wave no longer as inviting as it had been just moments before. Mark was the first to say what they were all thinking. We can't stop. It's too weird. Let's just go. The car sped past, the figure still standing in the same spot, watching as they drove away. But as they looked back through the rearview mirror, something didn't feel right. It was like the figure hadn't just disappeared. They were never there at all. The spot where they'd been was empty now, but there was no sound, no movement, just an eerie stillness. The sun had begun to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the road. It was getting darker faster than they had expected, and that's when they realized they'd made it. Wrong turn. What had been a straight path was now twisting into a long, winding road they didn't recognize. Where are we? Sarah asked, staring out the window at the thickening forest. This doesn't look like the map. Mark squinted at the road. Signs, but they were old, faded, hard to read. Every turn felt like it led to another one, deeper and deeper into the woods. They hadn't seen another car in what felt like hours. No towns, no lights, just endless trees and darkness closing in around them. Jason hit the brakes suddenly, his foot jerking up to the pedal. What was that? Mark leaned forward, trying to make out the shapes through the car's headlights. What do you mean, a shadow? Jason stopped, his voice trailing off. Wait, I saw it too, Mark gasped. Did you see that? Something had darted across the road too fast to be a person. It was more like a blur, something that moved in and out of sight so quickly that it almost felt like it wasn't real. The car slowed to a crawl as they all looked through the windows, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever it was. Then the world went still again. No movement, no sound, just the whisper of wind through the trees, and a heavy feeling in the air. Are we turning back? Jason asked, his voice tight. Mark opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, there it was again. A shadow darted past the car, this time much closer. It wasn't a person. It wasn't a deer or an animal. It was something else. Go, 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 Jason shouted, slamming his foot on the gas. But before the car could pick up speed, the headlights flickered, the engine sputtered. The road seemed to stretch on forever, but they were still in the same spot, surrounded by trees. And then it happened. The sound of footsteps, heavy and slow, came from outside. The hair on the back of their necks stood up. They all froze. But when they looked outside the window, there was no one there. Everything went silent. The road stretched ahead, winding deeper into the woods. The last of the daylight had vanished, and the darkness seemed to swallow the road whole. The car's headlights barely cut through the thick fog, and the trees loomed so close, it felt like they were closing in on the group. They were no longer sure where they were or how far they'd come. The silence outside was unnerving, and the only sound inside the car was the soft hum of the engine. Are we sure we're going the right way? Mark asked, his voice tight, his eyes darting around the road. It's fine. We're fine, Sarah said, trying to reassure him, though her voice lacked the usual confidence. Just a few more miles, then we'll be out of this." But the further they went, the darker it seemed to get. The road ahead looked like it had never been touched by a car, and the trees crowded them on all sides. The GPS had lost its signal a while ago, leaving them without any clear direction. Then, suddenly, the radio began to crackle. At first, it was just static. Then a voice, "Turn back now." The voice was faint, as if coming from far away or from a different time. It wasn't the usual radio station static. This was something else. The sound grew louder for a moment, almost desperate, before the static returned, louder than ever. Jason reached forward, slamming his fist against the radio. "What the hell was that? Just a glitch," Sarah said, but even she wasn't sure. There was something unsettling in the air now. A presence. As the group continued down the desolate road, they noticed a faint light in the distance. A house, maybe. It was hard to tell through the mist. "Let's pull over," Mark said suddenly. "We need directions. This is getting weird." They agreed, the growing sense of unease pushing them to seek help. They pulled up in front of a dilapidated house, its windows dark, no lights on. The place looked abandoned, run down, with weeds growing up around the porch. A single, rusted swing hung eerily in front. "Hello," Sarah called, as they knocked on the door. No answer. The door creaked open slowly by itself. A gust of cold air blew out, carrying with it a scent that was hard to describe, something like mold mixed with something older, decay. They stepped inside, the floorboards groaning under their weight. The house was empty, but there was an odd heaviness in the air. It felt like someone had just left, or like someone was still there, watching them. "Okay, this place is giving me the creeps," Jason said, his voice shaky. "We should go." But before they could leave, a faint whisper swept through the air. It wasn't clear at first, but then it became unmistakable. "Get out." The words were soft, chilling. The air felt colder, thicker, as if something unseen was closing in around them. "Did you hear that?" Mark asked, his face pale. "No, I didn't," Sarah said, her voice tight. "But let's go." They rushed back outside, the door slamming shut behind them. When they reached the car, things got even stranger. There on the windows of the car were strange symbols drawn in what looked like blood. They couldn't make sense of them, but the shapes were unsettling. They were ancient-looking, like they'd been etched into the glass by something that didn't want them to leave. "All right, this is not okay," Jason said, panic creeping into his voice. "We need to get out of here, now." But just as they piled into the car and tried to drive off, the car's GPS went haywire. The map on the screen was frozen, showing no new route, no way out. The car kept driving, but the road didn't change. "We've passed this before," Mark said, looking out the window, his voice shaking. "This is the same place." They looked around. The same trees, the same signs. They were stuck in a loop, and the road seemed to stretch on forever. Suddenly, the car's engine sputtered. It stalled, then completely shut off. Complete silence. The wind howled outside, making the trees creak and groan. The only thing they could hear now was their own breathing, fast and panicked. "What the hell is going on?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. The car refused to start. and no matter how hard they tried, it wouldn't move. The air was thick with tension, and fear had taken hold. They had no idea what was happening or how they'd gotten here, but they knew one thing for sure: they were no longer in control, and something was coming for them. They thought they were on a road trip, but it had turned into something much darker. The night had fully taken over, wrapping everything in its cold, suffocating grip. The car had been dead silent for what felt like hours. No engine hum, no radio crackling to life. The trees outside were nothing more than dark, shapeless shadows that seemed to close in around them, pressing in from all sides. There was no signal, no lights, no cars. They were completely alone, stuck on this road with no way out. It had started as a simple road trip, but now the weight of isolation was suffocating. The air was thick, heavy, like something was pressing down on them. Every turn, every mile, felt like they were sinking deeper into a place where nothing could help them. "This is insane," Sarah muttered, her voice trembling. "We've got to get out of here." She gripped the steering wheel tightly, but even her hands were shaking. "We're going in circles. We're lost. There's no way out of here," Mark said, his eyes scanning the dark forest around them. "We're stuck. There's no turning back now." Jason, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up, his voice tight with panic. "Where's Joe? He was just here a minute ago." They looked around, calling his name, but there was nothing, no response, just the sound of the wind and the rustling of the trees. "Joe," Sarah called, stepping out of the car. She looked down the road, but it was empty. There was nothing, just a vast stretch of trees and shadows. The forest around them felt alive, but not in a good way. It was as though it was watching. Then the silence was thick, the kind of silence that made your skin crawl. "I'll go check," Mark said, pulling out his flashlight. He couldn't have gone far. He has to be here somewhere. They waited in the car, every second feeling longer than the last. The air outside was cold now, biting at their skin. When Mark came back, he had a grim look on his face. "He's gone. There's just his flashlight." "What do you mean gone?" Jason said, panic starting to creep into his voice. "Where is he? What happened?" Mark looked around the dark woods, his flashlight shaking in his hand. "I don't know." But his flashlight was just lying there on the road. There's no sign of him. It's like he disappeared. The group got out of the car, their hearts pounding as they searched the road. But there was nothing. The woods were eerily still, no noise, no movement, just shadows. Then Sarah froze. She looked ahead, her eyes widening in shock. "Look," she whispered, pointing toward a small, weathered cabin deep in the woods. It was barely visible through the thick fog, but it was there, an old abandoned cabin. Something about it felt wrong. "Is anyone even here?" Jason asked, his voice nervous. "We have to check," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "Maybe Joe's there. Maybe he's just hiding." The group approached the cabin, their footsteps heavy on the soft ground, as if the earth itself didn't want them there. The door creaked open with a low groan, and they stepped inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Inside, everything was old, covered in dust. The air smelled musty and stale, like it hadn't been touched in years. But as they explored, they noticed something strange. There were photographs hanging on the walls, Old faded pictures of families, of people who looked eerily similar to them, faces frozen in time smiling, as if they had been captured in happier moments. "Who are these people?" Mark asked, his voice echoing in the cabin. "I don't know," Sarah said, staring at the photos. "But they look like us." Jason took a step closer to one of the photos, his hand shaking as he ran his finger across the frame. "This is too weird," he muttered. "These pictures, they were taken long ago, but they look just like us. How could that be then?" In the corner of the room, something caught Sarah's eye. A wall covered in old newspaper clippings. She moved closer, pulling one from the pile. It was a story about a missing person. The headline read, "Local woman vanishes on mysterious road." The date was from years ago. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice shaky. "Are these disappearances?" Mark moved closer and read over her shoulder. "Yeah, and they all happen right here on this road." His eyes went wide with realization. "Wait, it's not just one person. There's a whole list, a pattern." Jason's face went pale. "You're saying we're part of this?" But before they could process what they were reading, the ground beneath them shifted. A loud crash echoed through the cabin, followed by a scream. "Joel!" Sarah shouted, running toward the door. But before she could reach it, the door slammed shut, trapping them inside. Their hearts raced as they struggled to open it, but the handle wouldn't budge. They could hear something or someone outside, something moving quickly through the woods. There was a sudden tug at the door, and a scream, a terrible, gut-wrenching scream that sounded like it was coming from just outside. "Get away from the door," Mark yelled, pulling Sarah back. Suddenly, the door rattled. There was a loud bang, and then nothing. The air in the cabin turned cold. The group stood frozen, eyes wide with fear. The only sound now was the wind outside, whipping through the trees. "Where did he go?" Jason whispered. They stepped back, looking at the door. Then, with their flashlights, they turned and scanned the floor. The footprints, they were gone. And what was left? A strange, glowing mark in the center of the room. It wasn't there before. It looked like something had been dragged through the floor, leaving behind a faint, unnatural glow. The air felt heavy, thick with something they couldn't explain. And then, from outside the cabin, they heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving closer. The door was still locked. The window was too small to climb through. They were trapped, and whatever was out there was coming for them. The question wasn't just if they would survive. It was who would survive. The air was thick, with dread, heavier than the silence that hung around them. They had been running for what felt like hours, but it didn't matter. No matter which direction they took, they kept ending up in the same place. They were trapped. The road looped back on itself. The trees growing taller, denser. The car was their only hope, but it was as useless as the rest of them now. The engine sputtered, refused to start. The wheels spun uselessly against the dirt. The lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch far beyond their reach. "You can't be serious," Sarah whispered, staring out the windshield at the endless stretch of trees. "This is impossible. We're stuck." Jason slammed his fist on the dashboard, his eyes wild. "We need to get out of here. We need to find a way to." He stopped, his words dying in his throat as a noise cut through the air. It was faint at first, like the distant murmur of voices. Then it grew louder, closer, until it sounded like footsteps, something heavy moving through the brush. A snap of twigs, a low, guttural growl that sent shivers crawling down their spines. They turned toward the woods, the hairs on the back of their necks standing up. Something was out there, something they couldn't see, but could definitely feel. "We need to go now," Mark said, his voice tight, almost pleading. "We're not alone." Suddenly, Sarah froze. Her eyes went wide, locking on something. Jason followed her gaze, and there, just beyond the trees, they saw something, or rather someone. A figure standing still, watching them. It was him, Joe, but it wasn't. Not completely. His face was pale, his eyes vacant, as though something inside him had shut off. His body swayed slightly, like he wasn't sure where he was, or what he was. "Joe," Sarah called out softly, unsure whether to hope or fear. He didn't respond. Something wasn't right. The way his head tilted to one side, the way his eyes didn't blink. "We can't just leave him out there," Sarah said, almost desperate, but Jason shook his head. "No, that's not Joe. That's not him anymore. We can't help him." A loud crack echoed from the woods, followed by more rustling. Something else was approaching, something fast. They all knew that time had run out. The cabin, the strange markings on the walls, the journal, it was all real. They had made a grave mistake by staying, and now the forest was coming for them. While Jason and Sarah argued, Mark's gaze flicked down to the floor of the cabin, to the floorboards they hadn't yet searched. A small corner of wood had been pried up, just enough to reveal an old weathered journal. He bent down, his fingers trembling as he pulled it free. The pages were yellow, brittle with age. But the words inside those words sent a chill through him. The journal was written by someone who had been trapped here before, someone who had managed to escape, but only for a time. They wrote about the curse of the road, how it lured travelers in, only to trap them in the forest, turning them into part of it. It wasn't just a road. It wasn't just a forest. It was a living thing, hungry for souls, and once it had you, there was no escape. Mark could feel the blood drain from his face as he read the final line, the one that made everything clear. The forest takes you. You become part of it. You become one with the curse. His breath caught in his throat. They hadn't been driving aimlessly. The forest had been drawing them in, and now they were part of its story, part of its pattern. Suddenly, Jason's voice broke through, panicked and desperate. "Guys, look at Mark, look at his eyes." They turned to see Mark standing still, his hand gripping the journal, but his eyes, they were distant, clouded. His breathing was shallow, and his posture stiff. "Mark," Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "Mark, are you okay?" But he didn't respond, not with words. His gaze was fixed, unblinking, on something none of them could see. His body was no longer his own. Something had taken hold. "Mark, no," Jason shouted, but it was too late. Mark lurched forward, his body jerking, moving in unnatural ways. His face twisted in a grimace, as though something inside him was fighting to get out. The others backed away, horror flooding their faces as they realized Mark had been marked. He was already gone, swallowed by whatever force had claimed Joe. "Run," Sarah screamed, but Mark was already moving toward them, faster now, driven by something beyond his control. They turned and ran, the sound of Mark's footsteps echoing behind them. They had to get out. They had to escape before the curse took them to. But the woods were closing in, shifting around them. The path they had come from was gone, swallowed up by darkness. They were trapped with nowhere to go but deeper into the nightmare. As they made their way toward what they hoped was the edge of the forest, they saw it, the road. The same road they had passed at the beginning, but something was wrong. The road didn't lead out. It led them right back into the woods. They weren't going anywhere. They were stuck. And then, in the distance, they saw it, the car. The first car they'd passed when they started the journey, sitting still on the side of the road, empty. But it wasn't just any car. It was theirs. Their own car, the one they had driven before everything had gone wrong. The headlights blinked once, twice. A face appeared in the rearview mirror, a familiar face. It was Joe, but it wasn't Joe, not anymore. The spirit, the curse, it had taken him. And now it was coming for them all. The last survivor turned, running as fast as they could, but the darkness swallowed everything, and the figure from the woods emerged, closer now. It reached for them. The figure lunged. The fog clung to the robe like a ghost, swirling in thick tendrils that made everything feel like it was drowning in darkness. It slowly pulled back, revealing an empty stretch of road. Long and desolate, no sign of the group, not a single trace. Only the whisper of the wind moving through the trees, its voice quiet, haunting. There was no one left, no sound but the eerie hum of the night. It was as if they had never been there at all. They thought they were just passing through. But this road doesn't let anyone go, not without leaving something behind. It lingered on a faded, weathered road sign barely visible through the fog. It read, "Abandon hope all who enter here." The wind seemed to howl louder, but no, one could hear it now. The sign stood, its grim warning hanging in the thick, suffocating air. A warning no one ever listened to. Have you ever felt like you were being watched on the road? Ever been somewhere and just knew you weren't supposed to be there? Comment below with your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more spine-chilling tales. And remember, some roads are better left untraveled. Subscribe now at Horror Night Knocks, and keep sharing these stories with others, because you never know who's listening or watching.